So chances are you've seen some creators talking about Rocket League's ginormous dip in popularity recently. So this topic has definitely been covered before. Like if you go to Twitter right now, you'll be flooded with creators talking about Rocket League's decline. But the thing is, there are a lot of things that you guys, the viewers, don't actually know about this whole situation yet. Like there's actually a big reason why Rocket League is dipping down in popularity recently and why Psyonix is still doing nothing about it. So I'll get you caught up on the situation and explain why all of this is actually going on right now. And at the end, I'll share with you whether I think Rocket League is actually dying or not. Because that's the question that seems to be on everyone's minds. Like, is Rocket League actually dying? So as we know, Rocket League originally cost $20 about a year ago, but back in September of 2020, it went free to play, and that obviously made Rocket League so much more popular. It actually skyrocketed Rocket League's popularity way more than anyone thought. Like it wasn't even close. I remember seeing my channel's views literally quadruple that month, and it wasn't even because I was making better videos suddenly, it was because the videos I was making were applying to a much greater audience. And of course, no one was really expecting Rocket League to stay at that peak the entire time. We were all expecting kind of the initial rush to die out, but then it would reach a new baseline that was higher than the original one. That's normally how things like this go, and it makes sense logically that that's what would happen. However, clearly that's not what actually happened. Actually, at this point, Rocket League's viewership is back down to the point where it was before free-to-play. Basically meaning that all those new players, or the amount that's equivalent to them, have all died off and left and just lost interest in the game. And the reason everyone's talking about this right now so suddenly is because of this tweet right here. On July 4th, Sunless tweeted out, "Rocket League viewership on YouTube across all channels has shrunk literally in half the last couple months." And the reason this tweet sparked so much attention from all these creators is because we were all just individually thinking that we were doing poorly on YouTube. At least I was just thinking that the videos I'm making just aren't that good nowadays. So when it actually comes out that everyone in the Rocket League space was experiencing the same thing, it makes us realize that our lack of recent success was never our fault after all. Which on one hand is actually a good thing because now we know that it's not our fault. You know, we were doing just fine the whole time. But on the other hand, it's actually pretty scary if you think about it. We are now experiencing firsthand that a huge part of our success is completely out of our control. It's not so much about the videos we're making as it is about Rocket League's popularity as a whole. So when we realize that it's just out of our control, that's when everyone starts playing the blame game. So looking at this Google Trends graph here that Athena replied with, you can get a good visualization of Rocket League's popularity over time. Obviously, this massive spike here is free to play, and this is where we are now, exactly where it was before the big spike. To me, I see this as a huge miscalculation from Psyonix. Looking back on it now, I can kind of see what their strategy was, where they're trying to keep this game popular and generate some income at the same time, but clearly it was just a complete failure in terms of keeping the game fresh. My idea for what they were thinking was that free-to-play was just so successful that they would have all these new players that just hadn't experienced any of the previous 5 years of releases. So Psyonix would kind of get to re-release those items and treat them as if they were brand new almost. You know, they brought back the DeLorean, Kit, the Skyline, and some others, and even some new ones as well. It's overall just a lot of recycled content, but to free-to-play players, it's not actually recycled because they hadn't experienced it beforehand. The strategy makes sense in theory, but clearly it did not work out for trying to keep players engaged. Turns out items aren't actually enough to keep people interested in the game itself, which frankly, I could have guessed that beforehand, but regardless, at this point, it doesn't make any difference. Okay, so this is where it gets interesting. Remember how I said people started playing the blame game? And even though playing the blame game kind of sounds like we're actually in the wrong here and we're just whining about it, there is actually a lot of truth to this. So the biggest problem with Rocket League YouTube content specifically is the fact that there's nothing new to talk about, other than new items, of course, which most people just don't care about. At least I personally don't care enough to make a video about it because I've used the same exact preset for more than a year and a half. Anyway, the fact that there hasn't been anything new added to the game is the same reason why you see so many YouTubers making literally the exact same video over and over, but with different versions. There's just nothing else to do. And in case it's not obvious, no shade to anyone who makes these sort of videos. It's honestly one of the only types of Rocket League videos that people are still coming back to watch right now. But the point is, there just isn't much to do with Rocket League right now on the creative side. After all, recycled content in-game means recycled content in YouTube as well. So a majority of the Rocket League player base agrees that Rocket League needs new features, new maps, just new stuff in general to stay relevant. I think this graph is enough to show you that whatever they're doing right now is just not working. But it's important to realize exactly what we want changed. I was scrolling Twitter a few days ago and I saw this. Soccer is a dying sport. I give it a year or two. They haven't changed anything about the game in like 200 years. Baseball, basketball, and of course golf will also die because they just refuse to change the games to make the whining fans happy. See how stupid that sounds? I'm not gonna lie, when I first saw this, I was kind of annoyed because while that is a good point, it completely disregards what I think most people are actually asking for. The thing is, I don't think anyone is asking for a gameplay change. If Psyonix were to actually change something about the game, so like now you phase through cars or now the ball bounces differently or something, people would be pissed about that. When people are talking about change, or at least when I'm talking about it, I'm talking about adding new features to the game. Because there are so many things that could be added to Rocket League to make it so much better for both the casual audience and the competitive audience. For example, imagine if you could like record a car path that takes a specific dribble and then flicks the ball in a training pack. And for each shot, you have to defend that flick that you just recorded. If you actually think about it, defensive training packs are actually pretty garbage. The whole reason why defense is actually so hard in game is because you're trying to read the opponent. But in training packs right now, it's just a ball that's flying towards your net and you just have to reach it. Training itself is so limited, and that's just one feature. Not to mention how big custom workshop maps would be if anyone could create and play them. And the reason you can't compare Rocket League to a professional sport in this case is because when you come up with a new way to play or some new mode in a real sport, you can just go ahead and do it. The only thing that's limiting you is the laws of physics. But when you come up with a new idea in Rocket League, you can't just do it right away. You need to wait and hope that the developers will actually add that feature that you just came up with. And this perfectly leads me to the thing that everyone has been talking about, which is creative mode. If you don't know what creative mode in video games is, it basically just allows you to create custom maps or modes and you can share them and play them with your friends. The great part about creative mode being in the game is the fact that it bypasses that obstacle of needing to wait for the developers to implement your idea. If you have an idea for some new game mode, you can just make it yourself. And at the same time, it widely opens the horizons for content creation as well. But before we grab our pitchforks or whatever and just storm the Psyonix building, let's actually be real for a second. Because although creative mode would be really nice to have, it's unfortunately not that simple. And here's why. It's really easy to compare Rocket League to other games that add new content every single month or even every single week and think, why doesn't Rocket League do that? It's not like they've run out of ideas for new maps or anything. The community is always suggesting amazing ideas for new stuff to be added. So why don't they add more stuff? Well, there actually is an answer to that, and it has to do with Rocket League's game engine that it runs on. I don't think it does it anymore, but it used to be that when you launched Rocket League, you would see this logo right here. It's the Unreal Engine 3 logo. Basically, if they want to make changes to their game, they have to open up this program, Unreal Engine 3, and then make their changes. And the reason this is a problem is because some other examples of games that were made with this same engine are Gears of War 1, Borderlands 1, and BioShock. And these are the years that those games came out in. In other words, the engine Rocket League runs on is extremely outdated. So whenever they have a new idea that they want to add to the game, it takes way longer than it would for a modern game. So before Rocket League reaches the point where they can add new features just as often as all these other modern games, they would need to recode the entire thing without making any changes, all on an entirely new engine, such as Unreal Engine 5. And unfortunately, we don't even know if that's on their to-do list, which brings me to my final point. This is the one part about Psyonix and Epic Games that I just can't get behind them on. In case it's not clear, I try to be as open-minded as possible and give Psyonix the benefit of the doubt, but to me, I just can't get behind them on this. If you remember way back almost 2 years ago in 2019, Psyonix actually used to put out these things called roadmaps. It was basically them just posting an article on RocketLeague.com every few months that just shared with us what the plans were for the next few months of Rocket League. What features are coming next, what are the season rewards going to be, and so much more. But the last time they did that was in 2019. Since then, they've just been announcing individual updates just a few weeks before they actually come out. And this wasn't even really too much of a problem until recently. But the difference now is Rocket League hasn't added a new feature in almost a year, and we still have no idea what's next for this game. I made a tweet about this, and clearly a lot of people agreed. I said, you know what I just realized? We literally know nothing about the next feature that's coming to Rocket League, if there is any. How does that happen to a game with an active player base? To me, that's just baffling. The fact that we're completely in the dark about what's coming next. For me, this is my career. Clearly, after seeing how much my success is reliant on the success of this game as a whole, I think I deserve to know what the general plans are for this game. Like, are they going to update this game at all anymore, or are they just going to keep adding new items and that's it? If that's the case, which it has been for the past 10 months, I honestly wouldn't be surprised to see a bunch of Rocket League content creators move on to pursue something else. I think Hesh here makes a good point. He says, some people speculate they are making another Rocket League on a new engine, but I think that claim is solely based on the lack of new content, so not really anything. And that's totally true. We have no idea if the developers are working on something still, or if they're just done with this game and they're moving on to something else. And the weirdest part about this is everyone is talking about this everywhere, especially on Twitter and Reddit, which I know the Psyonix developers tend to browse a decent bit. There is no doubt in my mind that they see what is going on right now and that they see how serious it is. You'd think, especially at this point, that it would be in their best interest to share with us what's coming next. So the fact that they still haven't said anything about it, even after all this conversation going on, that's what's most worrying about it for me. Okay, now for the big question. After everything we've talked about so far, will Rocket League die? And my answer to that question is no, I don't think it will. And here's why. If you want to watch an entire video about why I don't think Rocket League will die anytime soon, this video right here is a perfect example of it. The thing about most video games that die is that there's always going to be the next shooter game or the next sports game or whatever that gets released, but Rocket League is literally its own thing. Like, nothing could ever replace it. If anything, Rocket League content might die because there's really only so many good original ideas out there, and the fact that there's not a creative mode and Psyonix isn't really adding any new features as of lately means that there definitely is a finite supply. And that's really what I'm most worried about, because I still see Rocket League as an unfinished game with the amount of stuff they could add. Psyonix definitely doesn't have a shortage of ideas, but for creators, with the tools that they're giving us, we definitely do. But for me, as long as I'm still loving what I'm doing and I can stay original, I'm not going to stop. So with that being said, thanks for watching. Appreciate you sticking through this, and I'll see you guys next week.